Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. The world is loud, but for these few minutes it can wait. Settle in and listen well. The Camel in Your Cup, on the devastating comedy of misplaced devotion. In the town of Chelford, there lived a man named Maxwell Pinnock, and Maxwell Pinnock was, by his own careful reckoning, the most devout soul who had ever drawn breath. He was a thin man, spectacularly thin, with fingers like pale celery stalks, and a neck so long that his head appeared to be attempting a slow escape from his body. His nostrils were permanently flared, as though the world itself were something unclean he was being forced to inhale. And every evening, without fail, Maxwell would perform his famous ritual. He would take his cup of wine, hold it beneath a candle, then Maxwell would squint into the dark liquid. With one enormous, watery eye, he would then pour it, with trembling, reverent slowness, through a straining cloth so fine you could not have pushed a whisper through it. Maxwell was hunting gnats. Not figurative gnats, actual gnats. Those tiny winged creatures the Levitical law declared unclean. Maxwell had never, in 41 years of straining, allowed a single gnat to pass his lips. He was enormously, spectacularly, almost violently proud of this. His neighbors were somewhat less impressed. Old Gladys, the widow who lived 3 doors down, had not eaten a proper meal in 9 days. Maxwell had noticed her thinning frame. He had resolved to pray about it, when his schedule allowed. The orphaned children of Virgil and Mabel, who had died of fever the previous winter, wandered the market each morning with large eyes and empty hands. Maxwell had spotted them once, and mentioned to his wife that someone really ought to do something. He owed the carpenter, a quiet man named Raymond, 14 silver coins for work completed 6 months earlier. The debt had not been forgotten. Not exactly, but it had become like a crooked chair in the corner of a room, something he simply walked around without ever seeing. And on every 7th day, when the Holy Scriptures were read aloud, Maxwell sat in the front row, closed his eyes, and Maxwell would nod so vigorously that his long neck bobbed like a heron fishing in a creek. He tithed with surgical precision. He could recite the dietary laws forwards, backwards, and, on special occasions, sideways. His straining cloth was legendary. People journeyed from neighboring towns simply to watch him pour. "Remarkable," they whispered. "The man has never swallowed a gnat." This was perfectly true. What was also true, though nobody in Chelford quite had the language for it, was that Maxwell Pinnock had been swallowing camels his entire life. Not small camels, mind you. Great, hulking, hump-backed, foul-smelling, sand-crusted dromedaries, each one roughly the size of a garden shed, each one sliding down his throat with the ease of warm honey. Justice unpracticed, that was one camel. Mercy withheld from the desperate, that was another. Faith shrunk down to a performance nobody believed, except the performer. That was the largest camel of all, and it went down without so much as a hiccup. Maxwell never tasted a single one of them. That is the remarkable property of camels in cups. The man who swallows them is always, without exception, the very last to know. Jesus of Nazareth met men exactly like Maxwell Pinnock. What Jesus said about them is one of the funniest and most devastating sentences ever uttered by a human tongue. "Blind guides," he called them, who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Let that image do its proper work. Picture it. A grown man with his phylacteries broadened for maximum spiritual impression, pouring his evening wine with the focused intensity of a jeweler examining a diamond, plucking out one miserable microscopic gnat, lifting the cup in triumph, and taking a long, satisfied, self-congratulating drink, while inside that cup, humps and all, legs folded, eyes bulging, sits a full-grown camel. The image is meant to be laughed at, and laughed at loudly. This must be said plainly, because centuries of excessively solemn commentary have attempted to sand the comedy off the passage, as though the Son of God would never lower himself to making people snort with surprised delight. He most certainly did. In the Aramaic that Jesus likely spoke, there may even have been a pun. The word for gnat, kalma, sounds almost exactly like gamla, the word for camel. Jesus constructed a joke, and he constructed it to stick in your memory like a fishhook and never come loose. 2,000 years on, here we sit, still seeing that ridiculous camel crammed inside a drinking vessel. The sentence works, but the laughter is not the destination. It is the doorway. The gnat and camel image is not merely witty, it is a diagnosis, sharp as any surgeon's knife. Jesus was describing a real and recurring disease of the religious soul, the meticulous inversion of what actually matters. His Pharisees tithed their mint and dill and cumin with extraordinary precision. They could calculate the fraction owed on every herb in the garden, down to the final seed. And while they counted, justice went unserved. Mercy went unpracticed. Faith shriveled into a display that fooled everyone in the room except the God they claimed to worship. You should tithe, yes, Jesus said, and notice that he affirmed the small duty. He did not cancel it. What he said was, do not neglect the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. The law, it turns out, has a hierarchy. Some commandments are heavier than others. The Pharisees had the entire structure upside down. They gave the weight of a camel to the matter of a gnat, and the weight of a gnat to the matter of a camel. They scrubbed the outside of the cup until it gleamed, while inside it was thick with greed and selfishness and the stale residue of lovelessness, and God, who sees cups from the inside out, was not impressed. Now here is where the laughter must curve back and find you, because this story was never really about Maxwell Pinnock. It was about the cup in your hand. What is the gnat you have been so carefully straining? Perhaps it is your doctrinal precision, polished to a shine. Perhaps it is your prayer routine, your faithful attendance, your immaculate opinions about how other people ought to live. None of these are wrong. Jesus himself said to keep straining. But while your hands have been occupied with the cloth, what has slid down your throat undetected? Is it the sharp words that you serve at your own supper table? Words you serve so regularly that your family no longer flinches? Is it the debt of forgiveness you refuse to pay, held back with clenched fingers, while you drop your tithe coins with an open palm? Is it the widow you walk past, the orphan you pray about but never feed, the neighbor whose name you know but whose grief you have never once asked to hear? Name the camel. Do not wave your hand toward the failures of the wider world and call it repentance. The camel is not somewhere out there. It is in your cup, and it has lived there so long it has become furniture. The Pharisees did not choose their blindness one dramatic morning. They drifted into it, the way a man walking through fog drifts from the road. Every gnat removed made them feel holier. Every gnat removed made the camel harder to see. And every gnat removed carried them one confident step closer to the pit that waits at the end of every road walked without sight. But here is the sweetness hidden inside this severity, and it must be named before we finish. Jesus bothers to warn. He bothers to build the joke, to make it so gloriously, outrageously absurd that it sears itself into memory and refuses to fade. A God who did not care would not waste the comedy. The laughter is itself a grace. It is the physician's wry joke, offered so the patient will hold still long enough for the examination to begin. And the examination leads not to destruction, but to an open hand. Give me the cup. Not the polished outside you display for the world, the filthy inside you have been protecting. He did not descend from heaven to inspect your straining cloth. He came to wash your cup, the inside first, then the outside. The heavy commandments restored to their proper weight, the gnats returned to their rightful smallness, and the camel, at long last, lifted out by the only hands in the universe strong enough to remove it. Do not look away. Selah.